Maverick News. The world is watching. In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
Greetings.
Hey, greetings. Good evening, Mr. Walker. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Strange Bedfellows, episode 20, the big 2-0. I'm your host, Lori Spencer, and my co-host from Maverick News, Rick Walker, up there in Canada, where it is Remembrance Day. I hope you're having a good one. That was a great show earlier tonight. Here in the States, we call it Veterans Day, but we're both marking the same anniversary for the same reason, 11/11.
It seemed to me Veterans Day didn't get much, if any, attention today from mainstream media.
I noticed that too. Same here in the States. Not a lot, which is strange because the whole world is exploding into a new world war. Maybe they don't want us thinking about things like that right now. Things like a draft. Things like our kids going off to the Middle East again.
Yeah, hopefully not.
But people are talking about it. And, we're going to talk a lot about, I hate to call them the kids. It seems rude. If I was 22, I wouldn't like being called a kid. I know I didn't like it when I was 22, but I still think of them as kids. When I talk about college students, I think of them as kids. But that's because I'm old. But tonight we have a guest who's a teacher going to talk to us about that. And, you probably already know him. We were very happy to have him back. We're happy to welcome back Tyler McConnell tonight, who is a frequent guest on Maverick News and the original co-host of Strange Bedfellows, my favorite Strange Bedfellow. If you don't already know Tyler, Tyler is a journalist. He's a musician. He's a stand-up comedian. And by day, he's a school teacher in Missouri, which is right next door to where I am here in Oklahoma. He's also a self-described conservative Christian communist. Let that sink in for a moment. A conservative Christian communist. And he's a political activist.
Whatever.
You're losing it, aren't you? He's also a political activist with the Center for Political Innovation, CPI. Our friend Caleb Maupin, we've had them on several times. But, Rick, the war between Israel and Hamas, it's divided a lot of families here in the States and up in Canada, including his own. Tyler was raised by parents who strongly support Zionism. They support Israel in this conflict, but over the years, his views have changed, and he now supports Palestine, and he's going to tell us why tonight. I also want to talk tonight about the generation gap. Remember back during the Vietnam War, they used to talk a lot about the generation gap, right? How the parents just didn't understand why the kids were out in the streets, protesting in support of the enemy, North Vietnam.
Right.
Some of them were. And we see that same thing today happening in this war, quite unlike any war I've seen since Vietnam. There is a definite generation gap between the baby boomers and the Gen Xers who, in every poll, when you look at the demographic breakdown, they overwhelmingly support Israel. No questions asked. And then you've got their millennial kids and their Gen Z grandkids who tend to support Palestine. And the age breakdown is so interesting when you look at a poll and you see that, up to 35% in some polls of the young generation under, say, the age of 30, they tend to strongly support Palestine, but their parents and grandparents, 65 to 89%, depending on the poll, support Israel. So tonight, I'd like to seek to understand through Tyler's experience as an educator himself and a leftist, the ongoing confrontations and the protests that we're seeing on campuses, and the alleged radicalization of students by their teachers, and also through extremist groups such as the Hamas-affiliated National Students for Justice in Palestine, whose activities on campuses in the state of Florida were recently banned at all state universities by Republican presidential candidate and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. College campuses, they've always been bastions of protest and free speech and controversial speech, where the young, push the older generations in the direction of the next big social or political reform. But I don't know, Rick, the war in Gaza has changed all of that, I think, to a degree that, for example, I'm a Gen Xer, and I was in college when the first Gulf War broke out, and I was very anti-war. We were all out, the student groups were protesting against the war because we didn't want to see the bloodshed. But I don't recall any student groups, at least not on my campus, who were supporting Saddam Hussein. That just didn't happen. So I find this to be very different, because now we see some student groups that just openly support Hamas. It's one thing to support the Palestinian people, the innocents who are caught in the crossfire, but some of these groups just openly back Hamas, and in some cases are backed financially by Hamas, and Hamas is feeding them teaching materials and training materials and propaganda. So I want to get into that tonight with Tyler, and I think he's getting his stuff set up. I think he's ready. Shall we bring him in? You ready, Tyler?
I'm ready.
Add Tyler to the stage. Welcome back, my friend.
Going?
Hey, good to see you.
You guys hear me okay?
Loud and
Sure
clear.
Can.
Sounding okay, looking okay. I mean,
looking
all
good.
Things considered.
What's for dinner? I see you're in your kitchen.
I'm in the kitchen. Yeah, we tried to go. It's like the scales as a parent with the 3-year-old and the 6-year-old. We can go down in the basement where we get like 2 bars on the internet and hope for the best, or we can be upstairs and have adorable little interruptions here and there. So,
oh, that's cute.
Yeah,
I think
that's what we'll
perfect,
go for.
Because we're talking about the future generations tonight, and we're talking about
there
kids.
You go.
You can bring your kids on the show.
I like the background.
Oh, well, thank you, Rick. Hey, I got something for you, Rick. In case I piss you off too much, I'm gonna put this
Oh, you brought the hat. Yay. I was hoping you'd bring that Canada hat.
You can't get too mad at me with this on.
No, I can't now. No, we're brothers.
America's hat.
That's awesome.
That's just a prelude to the invasion. I know it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. Coming to invade Canada.
Do you still remember the war?
Country appropriation is what that is, man.
The War of 1812, Rick. I haven't forgotten.
Yeah, well, you just remember, man, we burned your White House once. We can do it again.
I don't know. Well, I probably shouldn't say that because I'm already on numerous lists, but I did have a joke there. I'm not going to say it. But
yeah, I know. I better hold my thoughts on that one, too.
I
don't know how much what I'm really thinking.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know how much. Yeah, we all.
I know. Oh yes, I know.
You like my kitschy eat sign back there? I swear my mom put that up. Me and my wife deny that we put that up there, but I guess you eat in the kitchen, so.
Well, it's Saturday night. We're just relaxing, taking it easy. It's like having a conversation around the kitchen table with you.
Amen. Yeah. Yes, it is.
Which I would love to do in person, face to face, one of these days, since we're neighbors right next door, one state away from one another. Tyler, it's so good to have you back. You've been one of my favorite people. We started Strange Bedfellows together. You were with me for episodes 1 through 4 as co-host. And I love having you back any chance I can. I know you're so busy between teaching school and being a dad, and also you work as a pharmacy technician on the weekends, right?
I do.
Yeah.
Certified pharmacy technician, whatever that means.
Oh, congratulations. That's great, man. That's great.
Thank you.
So I wanted to bring you on tonight with it seems like Veterans Day, Remembrance Day is a good time to have this conversation. And because we are right now looking at a generation of college students who are protesting and asking for a ceasefire. Because tomorrow or soon they could be drafted.
Yeah. I had a sobering moment. One of my very favorite students from my first year of teaching. They had the Veterans Day Assembly on Friday, and I looked up on the board and said his name, and then it said Syria underneath it. And it was tough for me because I'll have kids that they kind of feel you out, and then you can tell you become their favorite, and then they tell you like, yeah, I'm signing up for the service. And it just hits hard because you see his name and he's there. And so anyway, that was my Veterans Day. But it was interesting when teaching on Veterans Day because this was completely serendipitous. I didn't plan it out this way, but we just finished our persuasive essay unit with a focus on rhetoric and persuasion. And we were listening to Martin Luther King's Why I Am Opposed to the War in Vietnam speech. So we had a Socratic seminar discussing that speech. And then we had just finished reading in journalism John Hershey's Hiroshima and had watched Grave of the Fireflies, which is a 1988 anime about a 4-year-old girl who starved to death after the firebombing of Kobe, Japan. And man, it was a heavy movie, but the kids liked it and they got why I wanted them to see it, because I feel, Modern Warfare 3 is coming out and all the young teenage boys are excited to kill their friends online. And there's just so much like rah-rah, war propaganda in America that I think it's good to see the after effects of war, of children starving, and that experience. It was a true story. The author who wrote the short story, his sister was 16 months old when she starved in Kobe.
My God.
He was 15 and he was running around trying to find her food, and he'd have that moment like, do I eat or do I feed her? And it's just harrowing. And, in journalism, we watch the news every day, and it just kind of hit home because on the news, I know that is happening in the Gaza Strip
In Gaza.
today. There are children starving to death, just like Setsuko in Kobe, Japan. And
I forget. Remind me, what grade do you teach?
I teach high school.
High school.
Yeah.
Like,
I would never teach that stuff any younger than, 15, 16. That's as low
Yeah.
as I would go with it. But
do you teach 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade? All of them? Or just...
I teach I teach 9th grade English and 11th grade English. And then my main electives are journalism and film studies. And those are mostly like 11th and 12th graders.
You told me an interesting story the other day, and I was wondering if you would mind sharing it here on the show about, we were talking a little bit about the generation gap, and how we haven't seen anything like it really since the Vietnam War. But we're seeing it big time with this war. We see that the parents, the baby boomers, the grandparents tend to overwhelmingly support Israel. And yet their kids and grandkids, the millennials and the Gen Z, they tend to overwhelmingly support Palestine. And that kind of mirrors your own experience in your life, right? Tell me how.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, would you?
I mean, I feel it's funny when it's you because it's how you were raised and it's where you live, and it's like you feel kind of like everyone thinks that way. But I mean, I grew up, my dad is a Baptist preacher.
Right.
My grandpa is, I would say, a Baptist preacher as well. He ran a youth group in the 60s. He was a youth minister. So, I'm steeped in that, and they are incredibly passionate about end times prophecy, and they see what's going on and they just say, told you so, more or less, is what they say. There's nothing that can be done to change it. This is written in God's word, and that's what's going to happen. I mean, down the street, literally, if I could throw, well, I could probably hit it with a rock. There was a church that I was driving to school a few years ago, and out in front of the First Baptist Church, there was an Israeli flag just flying by itself off the front of the church. And it kind of like jostled me, like I live in a town of 5,000 in rural southeast Missouri, and there's just an Israeli, and I knew immediately, what it was. So
We see that a lot around at our churches in Oklahoma too, but it's
Yeah.
usually flying next to the United States flag and the state flag of Oklahoma and the Israeli flag, but we don't usually see just one flag of a different country.
yeah, it's especially on a church,
Mm.
Separation of church and state, but
Not in Oklahoma.
not with that one.
Right.
But it's
Yeah.
difficult because, I don't know. I've struggled through this, and I think I was on a stream with Caleb and had talked about how I was struggling through this as well, just trying to figure
Saw
out
that.
what I think about it. And I'm still have my finger on the pulse, I believe, and I'm pretty sure the modern day evangelical Christian support for Israel can do no wrong is a psychological operation that has been at work for more than at least 75 years, maybe 100, by British intelligence and the CIA. And I don't have the facts well enough to lay them out, but I have a very strong intuition that that's what's going on. And someone had tweeted back to me, we'll just get this out of the way up front, but someone had tweeted back to me, you should check out True News, TRUNEWS. It's a YouTube channel. They're evangelicals and they are anti-Zionist. And so I checked that out, and I was very interested in that. Like, he had an old map of the Bible. He had a Bible that was like 100 years old, and when you're a kid, you love the maps the best. You open to the maps, and that gets you through the 2.5 hour church service. But he showed the map, and there is no Israel. It was just Palestine in the map, right? So various other points like that he made. Well, I'll just say this. Before I got on here, I got a phone call from someone very close to me, incredibly close to me, and had watched that channel and just had became livid that man is a false prophet, right? I tried to gently push back. I know you're watching, to the person I'm talking to. I love you, and you just texted me and told me you love me too. But the anger that was brought out in this disagreement amongst evangelicals over Israel, I believe, makes people behave not very Christ-like. And it's like, if you have to choose between support for Israel and behaving like Christ, they
and it divides Jews as well. I mean, not all Jews are Zionists or supportive of Israel at all.
I watched you guys I watched the video you showed me. I watched it this morning, Lori, of
That's Soviet
Yeah,
Palestine.
and I kind of felt out you guys' positions, and then I was like, "Uh-oh, maybe I've set myself up for an ambush. I better get that Canada hat out if I'm gonna be on there with Rick. I may have to put that old Canada hat on a little bit." But,
Soften the blow a little.
I know, like, in indie media, this is what we do. We talk about the thing that's happening right now, right? But like I just talked in our CPI meeting this afternoon, I said, guys, if more than anything, just be kind to people. I
Yes.
have relatives, like my dad, my grandpa. These are the best men I know who I love to death. And we don't agree on this issue. Okay. But I'm not going to let my disagreements on something happening 8,000 miles away turn me against the people that love me the most. I'm not going to do that. That appears to be what the media is trying to get the whole country to do.
Exactly.
Divide. It's like a binary choice.
Yep.
And, my sympathies, you guys know, but, I sympathize with the Palestinians. And most of the reason I do that
Yes.
is
Tell me
because
why.
of
What
what
changed your
Jews have
mind?
taught me.
Yeah.
Norman Finkelstein, Max Blumenthal, Ben Cohen. Her name's slipping my mind right now. Abby Martin.
Abby Martin.
Is Abby Martin Jewish? I don't know.
Or
The first
partially.
three are, I know for sure. Norman Finkelstein, Max Blumenthal, Ben Cohen. Ben Cohen made Killing Gaza, the documentary. Have you guys seen that documentary?
With Max. Yeah, with Max Blumenthal.
Max Blumenthal.
Yep.
I know Abby Martin made another one about Palestine. I think she made it during the peaceful March of Return, when they were just picked off like flies. Paramedics shot in the leg with sniper rifles, and that's where the Martin Luther King nonviolent protests got the Palestinians. So, but this is the issue of the day, and that's like I told my friend Peter Coffin. I said, just be kind to people, weather this storm, and then here in 6 months, a year, they'll pull out the the MPC chip and put in a new one, and then we can all be friends again. But right now, this is the issue of the day. So
can I get you, Tyler, to I'm interested. Tell me the story.
Okay.
The story that I'm hearing a narrative there, a storyline. I've been hearing it for a while, but tell me the story in your words that leads you to believe that Palestine is on the right side of this and Israel is on the other side.
Okay.
Or whatever it is, because I just want to get a sense of where you're at with it and whether what I'm going to hear is actually echoing what I'm hearing elsewhere.
Okay. I'd love to tell you. And I will say that as soon as this gets heated at all, I will back away very quickly and be like, hey, I don't know everything about this. This is not an issue that I'm willing to like go to the mat on, I will say, in my heart, it's sick. My heart is sick for the kids and what's going on. And, but people are disagreeing over like very basic facts. Like, was a hospital BOMB'd or not? And which side did that?
And why? Why is the big question, right? Is it a Hamas headquarters or is it just a hospital?
So, I mean, it comes down to, like, I teach my kids in the journalism class. I go, a lot of people, you ask them, where did they get their news? And they just say CNN or NBC or CBS. And I go, no, you need to drill down to people you trust, preferably people that have been there that you trust. So for me, I tend to trust Norman Finkelstein because he's courageous and sticks up for what he believes. And he destroyed his career. He destroyed his career in academia to where I don't even know if he can teach high school. But Noam Chomsky said he was like the most talented scholar he'd ever taught. And because of standing up to Israel, his career's destroyed. He can't teach anywhere. The same with Max Blumenthal. I don't know, I don't know why. I just trust everything else Max has ever told. I've never known Max to lie. And then Max
But
actually,
what
I'm not giving you the story.
but what's the story? Give me the story.
Okay. I think before I give you that story, it would be best just, I mean, do you know what evangelical Christians, like how they're taught about this topic, like how it feels to be raised in that?
I do.
Well, I'm not an evangelical Christian per se, so I
I'm hearing
well,
the buckle of the Bible belt. I know
Yeah,
all
but, you
about
know,
it.
I
honey.
know some. But
I just had a talk with a relative right before I came on here, and they're listening. You know, I'm trying not to point you out exactly, but I love you. And you get this real feeling growing up that if you don't support Israel, then your salvation is suspect, and you're very likely going to burn in hell.
Mhm. That's what they say.
And you have to support them no matter what, because they're God's chosen people. And if you don't support them no matter what, then Jesus doesn't love you. And they'll go, no, 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 no. But well, this relative just told me, if you don't support Israel, then you're bringing on the curses of God. And I go, so that means my salvation will be lost? No, 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 no. I'm not saying that. I'm like, okay, well then what? So that's kind of my base, Rick. Like I was raised like that for 18 years.
Mhm.
I kind of resent being treated like that, if that makes sense. So that's like my psychological baseline. When I started it was just kind of in the realm of like learning that I'd been lied to about a bunch of stuff. So I watched a documentary on Waco, right?
Mhm.
Oh, well, I didn't know about that.
I'm with you on that
Whoa.
one.
Okay. Ruby Ridge. Oh, okay. That's one, right? Interesting. And then I watched Killing Gaza by Ben Cohen and Max Blumenthal. And it was like hit me in the gut with the religion I was raised in. Like, oh, like a prosperity gospel type thing. Like, oh, is this just like an imperialist outpost? Is this like what Ronald Reagan's like Secretary of State said, that Israel is our aircraft carrier in the Middle East?
Mm.
Or I believe RFK just said something very similar to that. Like that's 80 to 90% of the world's oil supply is in that region.
Right.
And if Iran tries to cut off the Strait of Hormuz, then gas is going to triple in price. We can't allow that to happen. We need that oil. And so it just kind of made sense to me that they're using religion to secure their control of the world's oil supply. And in a nutshell, to me, that's what it's about. It's an imperialist move, being very sneakily, shadily CIA think tank. They've really thought this through. They've tried to find what group can we have rock solid support by appealing to their most internal, base, sincere desires for their desire for salvation. We can play on that. We can have rock solid support. And if we play it up from the pulpit long enough, they will never turn their backs on us, no matter what we do. And so that to me is what it seems like. I mean, just from what I've seen, and this was before any of these recent events, like Killing Gaza was made 4 or 5 years ago. You just look at it, it's just bombed out rubble, kids starving. And then Max Blumenthal has very like explosive interviews that he did in like Israeli bars. They've been completely deleted off YouTube. But if you go and like interview like teenage Israelis about what they think of Palestinians, I mean,
right. I've seen those interviews. And on both sides, it's hard to blame the Israeli kids for being raised to hate their neighbor, or the Palestinian kids being raised to hate their neighbor, because that's how long in generations this war between them with pauses has been going on.
Can I just I want to get the story from you though, because when you say you've seen these videos or you've listened to what some of these guys are reporting, what's tell me the story. Like you
Okay.
He said you've been lied to. So that's a key
So,
thing that I
you know,
keep
like,
hearing people say, we've been
there's
lied to
there's a
all these years,
classic.
lied to.
Have you watched the debate between Alan Dershowitz and Norman Finkelstein on Democracy Now! From like 10 years ago?
I
Don't.
haven't seen that
So
one.
you guys should definitely check that out.
It sounds interesting.
Let me well, I won't put it in the chat, but it's pretty incredible. I mean, Alan Dershowitz wrote a book about Israel and the creation of Israel. And
Mhm.
I don't know exactly all the details, but the gist that my subconscious remembers was like things like there weren't any people there really, you know, or like when the Zionists started moving in, that the Palestinians that lived there just left voluntarily. There was no sort of force used or anything like that. Anyway, he had like hundreds of citations of footnotes. So Norman Finkelstein went line by line through every single footnote. And he's debating him live on Democracy Now! And he's like, footnote 437, a flat lie, Dershowitz, you know? And he's like, this never happened. Your source is, it's not a primary source. It's like a person told a person told a person, and you cited it as evidence. And I just kept seeing things like that would deconstruct the myth of Israel that I had been taught, and opened up my mind to see things in a different light. Just enough things like that. Noam Chomsky's written about this for years. You know, it's not a new thing. But it's complicated because
It
mainly
is.
of the Holocaust, you know. And I don't. How do I say that? It makes me nervous to go too much into the details about it because I'm not Norman Finkelstein. I haven't went through 1,100 footnotes in Alan Dershowitz's book, you know. But his, I'll be honest, his case convinced me. What he had to say convinced me. And then there's a ton of other people that I deeply respect.
So
I think
what is it that he convinced you of? That what, Israel is behind something?
Oh man. Well,
Or
I mean,
the Zionists are
the fear
behind
that
something?
I feel to say it on the internet is also something, you know. It appears there was a Zionist movement brought about in the late 19th century. I think his name was Herschel or something like that. Wanted to return to the Holy Land. The British said, good, we don't like Jews much around here anyway. And plus, we want to control the Middle East. So, what's it called? The Balfour Declaration.
Balfour Declaration.
We got a nice piece of land here for you. Lawrence of Arabia, that was nice, you know. But we'll give that to you. And you guys start moving in, making settlements, and you got you got all the arms you need. We'll back you up 100%. You just move in there, take care of business, and we'll look the other way. And that way we can get our aircraft carrier in the Middle East. It's but you know, I just find it really interesting that there's also, like you said, it's split even amongst the Jewish people. Like I've seen Orthodox, you know, Hasidic Jewish rabbis who were against the creation of Israel as a state. And it's just so mixed up. Like the fact that I'm saying this online, right? If they can take half of Elon Musk's advertising revenue,
they can take your job. I understand, Tyler, that in this environment, as a teacher, you have to be very careful about what you say and what political positions you take, because right now, as we speak, there are college professors, high school teachers, even elementary school teachers who are being threatened with the loss of their jobs because of their position on the war. And I want to show you an example. I don't know if
I think people are resentful about that. I mean, I think that's kind of going on too. Like,
Yeah,
it's like I can't even
Yeah.
talk about this.
exactly.
know?
Right. And I want to show
I'm
you.
afraid to tell Rick. Rick's asking me a question, and I'm afraid to answer it.
Yes. Right.
Does that mean you're like kind of, I guess you are saying that you're not really saying everything you want to say?
Well, I don't know. It's just
I understand if you have to be cautious, and I don't blame you.
I don't know. It's like I think I did say what I wanted to say. I mean, I feel like Israel they've manipulated a lot of people's religious beliefs. I think intelligence agencies have done this to make sure they have a rock solid ally right in the middle of all that oil. I think that's really what's going on. And I think they're willing to use the atrocities that were committed 75 years ago as anybody who says anything remotely like what I'm saying, they're like, well, that guy's a Nazi, and now we don't have to listen to him anymore, which couldn't be further from the truth.
You're saying that the Jews hide behind the Holocaust and use that as a tool.
That is what the critics often say.
Is that fair?
That's one of those questions that,
You're afraid to answer.
And why would I be? I would never be afraid to answer that if you asked me like the Palestinians hide behind the Nakba, so you're afraid to say that, right? Like, but I do think it's good for me to be on here and to hesitate to talk about this because this is honest. It's how people feel. Like to a certain extent, yeah, I think that's going on. I'm not saying it wasn't an atrocity. I mean, I've read Mouse in my classroom. We read Night every year. We read all these books, but it's like Norman Finkelstein said, both my parents were in Auschwitz. I'm still out here saying what Israel's doing to the Palestinians is awful. So, but he can say that. I can't. I'm just a white guy in the middle of the country.
But saying that cost him everything.
It cost him everything. And that's why I respect him. Because when I see somebody who gave everything for a viewpoint against their own in-group, I mean,
I do respect that.
That's
about
Martin Luther King getting shot on the balcony for me. I mean, that's it's one of the most Christ-like things I can think of, where you completely sacrifice your own personal comfort to tell the truth about something wrong that you feel your own people are doing.
Let me ask you something, Tyler. As a teacher, school teacher yourself, I don't know if you've been following all the various controversies on not just college campuses, but elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. This is what happened in Oakland, California on Friday. Take a look.
Demanding an apology after they say the Oakland Teachers Union took a controversial stance on the Israel-Hamas war.
Jewish parents feel actions taken by the union encourage anti-Semitism.
ABC 7 News reporter Tara Campbell heard from some of those families.
Dozens of Jewish families, teachers, and allies rallied outside Montclair Elementary Friday, speaking out against a resolution passed by the Oakland Education Association earlier this week.
We are all united to urge the OEA to rescind this inflammatory and dangerous resolution.
There are still some amendments to the resolution yet to be finalized, but the OEA tells us the resolution endorses Palestinian liberation, encourages teachers to participate in pro-Palestinian demonstrations, and calls for a ceasefire.
I have a hard time understanding why a teachers union or a school board thinks they should be creating resolutions around one of the most complex international conflicts, when even global leaders currently cannot agree on a resolution.
Members of the American Jewish Committee, the ADL, and Jewish Community Relations Council were among those who spoke, calling on the OEA to reverse the resolution and apologize.
It is blatantly anti-Semitic. It is wrong.
The OEA responded by pointing us to an earlier statement posted on social media. It reads in part, "Our union unequivocally condemns anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. We call for the release of hostages held by Hamas. We mourn the loss of life, and we add our voices to a growing collective calling for a ceasefire.
I think it's really powerful when unions take a stand for teachers, for workers' rights, and issues affecting students and teachers in school everywhere.
Yahia Kaji is a high school teacher at OUSD and says he supports the resolution.
When we talk about taking a stand in support of Palestine and a ceasefire, we're talking about Palestinian students. We're talking about Palestinian schools that have been destroyed by the Israeli military.
Meanwhile, back at the rally, parents take to the podium with a plea.
We are afraid to send our kids to school. We are afraid to wear a Jewish star. We are removing mezuzahs from our doors.
Tara Campbell, ABC 7 News.
Happening where I live. You could wear a Jewish star or a Palestinian flag, and most of the kids are going to have no idea what that is. So,
Is that right?
yeah.
I think some of this may be a generation gap thing, but I have a question.
Yeah, no, I'm here to answer questions. I will say the question Rick asked me earlier, where he's like, so are you saying the Jews are hiding behind the Holocaust? It kind of felt like asking, like, so you're saying it's okay to say the N-word in the classroom? It's like a similar type. It has nothing to do with each other, but it's set up as like this issue where you're like, record scratch. You know what I mean? You're like, I'm just
I bring it up. I bring it up, Tyler, because we are seeing a real rise in anti-Semitism, a real rise, and Islamophobia as well. And I've just been observing, for quite some time, this narrative that has been spun, especially within, I would say, the freedom movement, QAnon.
Okay.
And I'm just one, and a lot of people are being pulled in this direction with this narrative, and the language is pivoting. It's changing. And I'm looking actually here on my phone for a clip that somebody sent to me, and I'm hoping I can find it, that will very clearly and illustrate my point, if I can find it at some point. And I'm not in any way trying to attack you. I'm really trying to explore this, because it's
I'll put the Canada hat on. I got it somewhere.
I
should have put it on. I missed the golden
That's your
opportunity.
battle armor.
Right when you asked me that question, like, are the Jews hiding behind the Holocaust? I should have went.
It's a clip from a show, and I can't remember the name of the show, but I'll find it at some point. You guys continue on, and
well, I was just
going to say my question
in this, you want to be like, oh, that's not me, but it sounds like, well, I have a lot of black friends. That's what it sounds like. But I mean, a lot of the people that I got into alternative media through was like, the reason I went into journalism was because of Noam Chomsky. Am I like, well, he's a Jew, so I don't, and then the people that made me want to be in alternative media were Max Blumenthal, Ben Cohen, the people that made me excited about being a teacher or a professor, Norman Finkelstein. I mean, it's not, I feel like they're conflating, like, criticizing what the state of Israel is doing as, I believe, like an imperialist outpost of the United States. I mean, they literally said that's our aircraft carrier in the middle of the East to control the oil supply, with, oh, well, you hate Jewish people. And it's just not true. And I feel that's unfair. And when I see some sentiment like that, I think, okay, this has been created by an intelligence agency to control the population in some way to get what they want.
Ever occur to you, Tyler, that maybe it's not just the CIA doing everything? Whenever I'm talking to anybody
really
about
unfair,
any of this
Rick.
stuff, no, man.
Man.
Everything's the CIA's fault. Everything. And I'm not saying the CIA doesn't do some pretty nasty stuff, but everything, it's always the CIA. It's always controlled opposition, or it's always some excuse. And it's always the CIA. Is it ever anybody else? Ever?
But that's my intuition, and I think it's true. But I mean, you can say that if you want to.
I'm just, when you sit back and you look at, what does this action, who does this benefit, and who benefits from that? Who benefits from mass immigration? Who benefits from these various actions? And you sit back and, some of this stuff, if you just, I have yet to sit on a program in the past probably 3 years and ever hear anybody blame any intelligence service other than the CIA. It's always the CIA.
No,
every single time.
When I say the CIA, I mean
wrong,
the Mossad.
it's the CIA. There was a war. That's the CIA.
Any
there's
of
a war
them
here. There's a war there. It doesn't matter where the war is. It's always the CIA. Hell,
Because
the
it
CIA
usually
is trying
is.
to take over Canada. The CIA's taking over the whole world. It's always the CIA.
I think
the CIA is responsible for some pretty terrible things.
I think they're the best at it.
Very, very direct evidence that shows, in specific instances, absolutely the CIA. But I'm just saying, maybe people can open their minds a little bit more and think that maybe there are other countries involved as well. These kinds of operations are not exclusive to the CIA. Now, I shouldn't say that, it's always the CIA. There are some other media outlets out there, but not on this side of the political fence, not within the circles that I move in, not even with you, right? Not with the freedom movement. It's always over here on this side, always the CIA. It's never anybody else. It's always the CIA, or in Canada, occasionally it's CSIS, and it's always the same thing. It's like whenever they want to blame somebody or they can't figure something out, must be the CIA. And all it takes is somebody to say, it's the CIA. And then everybody goes, oh, of course it is. It's like no evidence. It's just the CIA. But it's just a go-to. But we're never going to get to the truth about things if it's always just CIA. And when I'm looking at what's going on and I've been listening to this narrative be spun up. I was getting sucked in early on during the pandemic. That's when all this stuff really started to ramp up. And I'm going to try and find you the clip to show you where it all goes in the end. Okay, Tyler, and this is why the people, on the left are, and I'm not taking a side. I haven't taken a side on this issue. I really haven't, because I just want the killing to stop. But I'm seeing propaganda on both sides. I'm seeing it ramped up heavy on both sides. I see fake crap online. I got sucked into a bunch of videos myself that I thought were real that it turned out not to be, from both sides. And you can't tell me that, other countries don't have interests in the Middle East as well. It's not just the United States. It's a lot of countries. Every country in the world has interests in there. And every political entity is out there looking out for their own best interests. And it's the law of the jungle out there in the international world. Right? It's like, who's got the most guns? It's a bunch of gangsters who run all these different countries, and they're all pitted against each other, and they're going to do whatever it takes to win. And we are at war. This is a third world war, and it's being fought in completely different ways now. It's absolutely an information war. Absolutely. And as I've seen this pandemic, when that broke out, everything changed. That was the moment when a lot of this rhetoric, this narrative really got roots. And, it's like, what is the story? The story that we've been told is that you've been lied to. You've been absolutely lied to. And everything you thought you knew is a lie. We've been going through a long process of having our history rewritten, especially here in Canada and in the United States. Statues torn down, religious institutions undermined. And as a result of all of that, when the pandemic hit, you've got all of these people who have been, watching the internet, and they're getting this whole story. And what's the story being? The elites are controlling everything. You've got this new world order coming in, and what are these elites doing? They're controlling banking. They control all the money. They control all the wars. They don't care about you. They're trying to kill you with chemtrails and pharmaceuticals. And who controls the pharmaceutical industry? The elites. It's all the elites. And that's what we've been fed a steady diet of for over 3 years now.
But then the narrative began to change. They started to identify who
are
the elites are.
These elites. And the elites are the Jews. That's who it is. It's the Jews.
Darjuden.
Well, you know, my friend Caleb Oppen calls blaming the Jews as what did he call it? It's like Marxism for dummies, is what he calls it. Like where you go, oh, you're talking about Wall Street. I know who you're really talking about. So you can't really do a class analysis of like there are people in this world who want the oil supply, and you know. Don't say the CIA, say the intelligence agencies. To me, this, as a Marxist, this is a class war. CIA stands for Capitalism's Invisible Army. If you don't want it to be in Langley, it can be in Mossad, it can be French intelligence, it can be British intelligence, it can be... But I think they want that oil, and they are willing to play on people's religious beliefs and manipulate the media to make sure that they get it.
And speaking
Otherwise,
of Caleb,
I don't know how my relatives could be okay with, like, you know, children being blown up. It doesn't make sense from a Christian worldview.
Speaking of our friend Caleb and the media, I don't know if you saw him, but Thursday night he was out on the streets of New York City covering the huge pro-Palestine protests. And you've probably seen this clip. I don't know. I'll play it for you. But we get a glimpse of Caleb out there in the middle of this melee, covering it all for RT.
Do a stand-up? Yeah, okay. All right. I'm ready. You need the cards? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. And then 3, 2, 1. Now, as you can see, some of the protesters got their hands on this New York City.
Thank you so much.
I don't know if they're going to be happy that this is on the card.
Okay.
This might be a bad look.
It's okay. We're going to finish.
Oh, Rick, I hate to say this, Rick, but you know who that looks like to me? The CIA.
I'm sorry, were you talking to me? Because I was trying to queue up a clip.
Yeah, he was talking to you, Rick.
Oh, man.
Tyler said it was the CIA.
But I slowly put the Canada hat on while I said it to try.
I'm not trying to
to
defend
avoid.
the CIA. I'm just trying to get to the truth.
Heavens no.
No,
I'm just like,
I just felt it was unfair. I felt like you thought that is the depth of my analysis. Like anytime something goes bad, I just say it's the CIA.
I was speaking broadly about everything I'm hearing from people. This is always like, it's always the same thing. It's like in the freedom movement, it's always like, anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, it's more complex than always the same answer.
Well, that's exactly why I chose you tonight, Tyler. Caleb and I have talked about it. In fact, one of the things I love about you and Caleb and the people at CPI is you're my favorite commies, I always like to say, because you're actually reasonable, intelligent people who don't engage in this kind of crazed binary thinking that, you must hate the Jews if you support Palestine.
Marx was a Jew.
Exactly. It's a very complex thing. And you have to be fluent in your history. Caleb is a great historian himself. He's a history teacher. He's also very fair because he understands the role that anti-Semitism played in, post-World War I Russia, during the Russian Civil War, the pogroms, and everything that led to the Holocaust. And I need to point out that video we just looked at was from Thursday night, which just happened to be the 85th anniversary of Kristallnacht, which, of course, was the Nazi pogrom that went on for 2 days. And it was the beginning of the Holocaust. Now, I took offense at that video when I saw, I don't mind them protesting. I don't mind them getting out in the streets and waving their flags and doing their chants. But on that particular day, did they have to go smashing windows? Because that tripped a wire inside of me. As a historian, I see that as an obvious, either total lack of sensitivity to the Jewish people and how Jewish people would interpret the busting of windows. And we did see a lot of busting of windows all across parts of Europe on the anniversary of Kristallnacht. And yes, we saw it right there with the busted out window of that cop car and some shop windows in New York City. And then they come back and claim they're not anti-Semitic. Okay, well, are you just dumb? Do you not know what Kristallnacht was? Or do you just lack sensitivity? And that's why I love you and Caleb, because you don't lack sensitivity. You're sensitive to both sides. And, you're sensitive to the feelings of Jewish people when they see something like that.
I would be amazed if there probably were like edgy Jewish kids in that protest.
There were.
Yeah. So I guarantee they weren't thinking about the historical relevance of Kristallnacht.
I don't even think they know it, Tyler. They're just mad.
They're mad. They want to destroy some stuff.
Do you think that they're mad at mom and dad? Do you think that this plays some role?
A psychological idea? I was trying to think through my own psychological impression of this, and I do feel for the millennials, I think it has something to do with us becoming politically aware during the George W. Bush era. Absolutely. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's just we have like a knee-jerk gut reaction to sort of like overt, right-wing, not right-wing, Republican. It's just whatever was big at that time. It was like that's when we came of age and became political. And, Israel's in that sphere. And
makes sense.
I think in a way, as our generation, it's like we resent not being allowed to talk about that, or we're afraid to say what we think, like we've talked about, because horrible things can happen to you.
Well, speaking of George Bush, I have a clip right here of George Bush that I brought just for tonight, because I think, as I was just saying, a lot of these kids aren't being taught their history. A lot of these kids, if you stopped a kid at that protest last night and said, "Hey, what was Kristallnacht?" they'd look at you like you had two heads. And the question is, Tyler, is our children learning?
Rarely is the question asked, is our children learning? As yesterday's positive report card shows, children do learn when standards are high and results are measured.
Well,
now that was in the year 2000 is when he said those infamous words, "Is our children learning?" So that was 23 years ago. And those kids are now in college, and they're going to the schools like Harvard, like Columbia, like your local university. And if you look, I'm going to play you a little footage from last night in New York City. You know, these protests just get bigger and bigger and bigger. Last night, they shut down Grand Central Station. They had to lock the doors to keep the protesters out. And it was absolutely huge. But look at the average age, and you'll see that most of these are college kids.
placed under arrest and charged with disorderly conduct. This is the New York City Police Department. You are unlawfully obstructing pedestrian traffic. You are ordered to disperse now to prevent the safe flow. To disperse, you will be placed under arrest and charged with disorderly conduct.
Well, it looks like some of my students are in the chat, so no pressure there. Hey, but your comment looked just like what you'd say in class, buddy. So I love you. If that's you, you're the man.
Well, I found the clip, but I'm afraid to run it.
Oh, yeah. Is it that bad? It's going to get us all in hot water.
It could.
You just want to tell me about it? I'll believe you.
Well, here.
It's up to you, man.
Let me bring it up here. And it's long, so I'll give you just a little bit. I keep clicking on the wrong thing here. There we go. Okay. You know who Chris Guy is?
No.
Okay. Very.
You're
popular.
playing a Rumble video on YouTube. That's a dangerous idea.
It is. And for that reason, I'm going to dump off YouTube.
Okay.
Off my YouTube anyway. Laurie, if you're listening, you may